Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to this Astrology, Human Design, and Gene Keys channel with me, Tan, today. And today we're going to be talking about Gene Key 20. But before we get started, if you guys are interested in getting a human design, astrology, or Gene Key reading, then you can head over to my website, tanastrology.com. Me and my team have a variety of different services offered there available for you guys. Whichever one feels right for you, we'd be happy to be your guides on your self-discovery journeys. So, of course, we begin our Gene Keys videos with a short overview of that particular Gene Key. So, Gene Key 20 moves from the shadow of superficiality to the gift of self-assurance to the siddhi of presence, the sacred Om. And this spans 007 degrees of Gemini to 545 degrees of Gemini. So, if you have this archetype anywhere in your chart, you can comment below and share with us your experiences of it. In the Dream Arc Totem Codex, the fear key animal is the fly, the life key is the skunk, and the vision key bird is the crane. In the codon ring, Gene Key 20 is part of the ring of life and death and is associated with the amino acid leucine. In the 64 I Ching hexagram, this hexagram is wind over earth, contemplation, listening to the whispering wind, respond to life with complete trust. I love it. The programming partner of this archetype is Gene Key in Human Design Gate 34, and that's the opposite point in the zodiac wheel, so it's at Sagittarius archetype. And I highly recommend that you check out the programming partner video as well, which I'll be posting real soon after this, because the programming partner offers a balancing complementary opposite point to this archetype. In Human Design, Gene Key 20 is part of 3 channels, channel 1020, 2034, and 2057. And this particular gate 20, is located in the throat. So let's look at the bird associated with this archetype first, as we do with all of them, because we want to link these particular archetypes back to nature. And so when it comes to birds, this particular archetype is corresponding to the bird, the crane. So the crane is an ancient symbol of patience and concentration. And what is so fascinating about the crane is, everybody knows this, it's the way they dance. So they have a ballet-like dance move for mating purposes, but also they just enjoy dancing for fun. When they're bonding, the males and females will point their bills to the sky and call back and forth for about 10 seconds. So this calling that they do almost feels like they're calling in divine presence. And the divine presence has almost transcended into the physical realm. So the movement of the crane is also an inspiration for several styles of Kung Fu. For example, the Wing Chun, the Hung Gar, and various other types of Kung Fu. This is inspired from the natural movements of the crane in the wild. So if you have this particular archetype anywhere in your chart, some of the traits that you have here are going to be that you have very good reflexes in the moment. Like your physical spontaneity is very spot on, whether that is verbal spontaneity in the moment or whether it's physical spontaneity in the moment. And you are also somebody that loves to contemplate life, loves to reflect on life. Maybe you even love meditation. And you are somebody who's in the present moment. You know, you're not too worried about the future or too stuck on the past. You live in the now. However, we can also have the lower energy frequency of this archetype as well, which means that you are concerned too much about the future or the past, mostly the future. So you're kind of a busybody and you're never really in the present moment. You never enjoy what's here right in front of you because you're too busy trying to make something happen for the future. So let's look at the shadow of this archetype first, as we all do as we move up the different levels of energy frequency. And the shadow here is called superficiality. Ooh, I feel like a lot of people who have this archetype, when they hear that their shadow is superficiality, they're extremely triggered by it. But I think that if you're triggered by this shadow in some ways, it's worth considering the fact that you might still be in the shadow frequency. Otherwise, you wouldn't be triggered by it. So Richard Rudd describes this archetype of Gene Key 20 as the quantity of consciousness, the amount of consciousness that can be expressed and come into a human being. So when you're in the shadow of superficiality, there's very little consciousness in your being. So we can say living life without consciousness. That is the superficiality level of this archetype. So you live life, but you never really plunge into life. So this particular gene key has existed in the world since the insect. And so Richard Rudd talks a lot about insects when he talks about this archetype, and how we always see insects being very busy, and they tend to live very short lifespans. But with the time that they're alive, their main focus is mainly to just survive and reproduce. Not to say that this is good or bad, shadow or higher frequency. This is just the archetype, the themes in general of Gene Key 20. And so the early hominoids, or the early humans, also lived pretty similar to this until the development of the neocortex in our brain, which allows us to think about things a little bit more with more complexity. However, with the development of the neocortex, we begin to think in timelines as well. So we begin to think in terms of the future, the present, and the past. And so the development of the neocortex also, in its shadow frequency, stops us from actually being in the present moment. It has made us create this false reality that we call time. So when you're in the shadow of superficiality, you are completely dominated by your thinking to the point where your consciousness doesn't function fully at all, because you're always thinking. And this is living superficially. This is living superficially, because what this means is you're simply living your life based on the limitations and the fabrications of your mind. So to put that in simple words, what that means is you only live your life based on what your mind can basically comprehend and make excuses for and think you into doing. So you never really live from the body, you never live from the emotions, you never live from spirit, you never live from your soul, and you never really live from consciousness. You just live from the thinking. That is the superficiality. So when this superficiality is translated into action, it becomes a blind activity. So it's somebody that would just be doing something just for the sake of doing something, because their mind is thinking, oh, I should do this, even though their body is not really attuned to it, or their emotions not really attuned to it, or the people around them is not really attuned to it, but their mind can think it, so they can do it. So this is, at the shadow frequency, can also be similar to insects as well, but actually in the siddhi and the gift, it's also similar to insects, but it's just coming from a different motivation, if you see what I mean. So here it's also similar to insects that are just busy for the purpose of being busy. And when your activity doesn't have much awareness or consciousness within it, it can become a destructive force within your environment. The reason why a lot of the nature in our world right now is being destroyed is because we are so busy as a species that we don't think about what we're actually doing and what we're actually busy doing. We just kind of do a lot of stuff and we harm the environment, we destroy the earth. So Richard Rudd says that only when our solar plexus, so our emotional plexus center in our body, overrides the mind, that is when we can truly do something, not just for the sake of doing, but we can actually follow aligned action. Aligned action comes from us being able to listen to our solar plexus, not us having the mind run our activity and run our daily lives. This is what is called right action. Right action occurs when the frequency of your DNA lifts you out of the shadow frequency, at which point all of the things that you do, all of the actions that you take are just occurring naturally and harmoniously with yourself and with the environment. So in the repressive nature of superficiality, it's called absent. So when you're absent, when you're around people who are in the absent state, they are like not really there with you. You can notice this when you look into their eyes. Their eyes seem almost distant and far away. They could be looking at you as you speak, but they're not actually with you as you're speaking and present with you. They're like thinking about something else. They're off into space. They're thinking about what they have to do next tomorrow, what they have to do later that day. The consciousness within you when you're in the repressed state is frozen by an intense unconscious fear. A fear of things not happening in your life in the way that, and in the timeline that it should be happening. So another way of looking at this repressed shadow also, and also the reactive shadow as well, which we'll look at, is that the superficiality here is also that you're attached to the thoughts of what should happen at a particular time in your life. Like maybe when you reached 27 and you're like, oh my God, I have to get married now because that's the timeline of human beings. That's what we should be doing. And so you're always thinking about, looking for a partner who you can get married to, or maybe even rushing to marry somebody that maybe is not really right for you, but you think, oh my God, it's a timeline. So you get busy doing all of these things. There's no consciousness. There's no real awareness. There's no real being in the present moment. Because if you are in the present moment, maybe you begin to realize, I'm not ready for it. My body's not ready for it. My partner's not really ready for it. I'm emotionally not ready for it, or whatever it is. And you're okay with that because you know that things will happen for you at the right time for you, not the right time for the timeline, the false timeline that we have created and constructed with our minds. So the reactive nature of superficiality is what is called being hectic. So this is, of course, when we translate superficiality into activity, and you are somebody who becomes ceaselessly on the move, unable to stop your hectic self-absorption. And you'll see that these people who are in the hectic, and of course you're going to be in both, you're going to jump from the repressive and the reactive from time to time in your life. When you're in the hectic phase of this, you are going to be somebody that doesn't really have time for anybody else except for yourself. Like even if you're meeting somebody, if you make an arrangement to meet with your friends, you're making sure that you're meeting them because you're going to get something in return for yourself to feed your own timeline. So you're never really there for other people just to be with them. Like you're just always like, oh, I don't have time for you. If it's like to be there with somebody just to be with them, it's like, oh, I don't have time for that. It's that kind of energy. So let's see how we can move from this shadow of superficiality to the gift of self-assurance. So the first step to achieving self-assurance is to first let go of thinking or using the mind as the main decision-making authority in your life. Because according to human design, when you look at how to best make decisions in your life, you have something called an authority. And for all human design types, the authority is never the mind. It's either the solar plexus, the sacral, the spleen. Maybe it's self-projected. And even if it's called like a mental authority, it still doesn't mean you should make it from your mind. It means you need to talk to people and see how you feel when you talk. Or sometimes it's the ego that's an authority, but it's never the mind. You can step into self-assurance when you accept that life has its own plans and its own flow. When you begin to trust that decisions just simply get made spontaneously, that you can make spontaneous decisions in the moment without having to think about it and plan it in your mind before you actually have to make that decision, you can step into self-assurance. Richard Rudd says that the gift of self-assurance is the foundation of a happy life. If you have children that grow up being fully self-assured, you will be able to build an adult that becomes self-assured. And in order to foster an environment in which children can be, and if you're a parent, this is going to really be a good point of this video for you. So if you are a parent and you want to foster an environment in which children can grow up feeling self-assured, you have to give them an environment where their natural strengths can organically flow and develop. And one of the best types of environment for children to grow up self-assured is to grow up around adults that are self-assured. And this means that there is an environment of relaxation, of openness. Adults or families in which there are adults there that are manifesting right action rather than superficiality is the perfect educational base for children. The gift of self-assurance has a lightness about life. It is the ability to have this inner feeling that there is some higher presence looking out for you, that you're not alone. You don't have to force things to happen in your life. And maybe these are spirit guides or angels that are looking out for you. This is a sign that pure consciousness is beginning to descend into the physical vehicle. And the gift of self-assurance means that you slow down enough to have time to experiment with your solar plexus awareness, which is the true center of consciousness and awareness. So if you're watching this and in your human design, for example, you have a solar plexus authority, and you also have this gate. Before you make any decisions in your life, you need to wait for your emotional waves to clear out. And that can take time. Sometimes waiting for the right decision with the solar plexus means that you have to at least sleep on it for 24 hours. Sometimes it means you have to wait a few weeks or months or sometimes years before you know which decision is right for you or not. So the plexus is a slow-moving decision-making center. Consciousness is forever evolving, but it is a slow, gradual evolution. It is not a forced, fast, rapid evolution. The level of your self-assurance is going to be equivalent to your ability to escape from being the victim of your mind. What I mean by escape being the victim of your mind means that you're able to be an observer of the states of your mind. You're able to watch your thoughts without feeling the need to do something about it. Because if you have a thought and you are overpowered by the thought and the thought is controlling you and controlling your actions, you're no longer objective to that and you are becoming the victim to the power of your mind. So just observing your thoughts, being in a meditative state and being able to observe your thoughts as they come, that is to be truly no longer a victim of your mind. Self-assurance is the continuous feeling that everything is going to be all right. You no longer have to try and control life, but now you allow life to move through you. Like the crane, when it's doing its ballet dance, it's allowing life to move through its physical body. This gift of self-assurance is about tapping into the most powerful, universal, feminine power, because self-assurance is based upon surrender rather than assertion. Self-assurance is based on the philosophy of allowing things to come to you rather than going and chasing after things in life. This is also what Richard Rudd calls divine laziness when it comes to the 20th gene key. So let's move to the Siddhi of Presence. Now, of course, like I mentioned with all my gene key videos, I don't want to talk too deeply or too long about the Siddhi frequency because the Siddhi frequency is really just a state of being. It's a state of enlightenment even. The more that you are in touch with the gift, the more that the Siddhi will begin to dawn upon you. Richard Rudd says that the Siddhi of Presence should actually be called the Presence because it's really about the presence, the divine, coming into your physical body. It's the presence of the divine coming through the human instrument. This is when pure consciousness floods into your being, silencing your mind and activity completely so that you are forever in the present moment. You begin to notice that the smallest things in the world, like a leaf, a rock, has so much life in it. It is full of life. And this presence is everywhere. So I don't know if any of you guys have done like silent meditation retreats. I don't have this gene key, by the way. I don't know if my grandma has it, but she forced me to go to a silent meditation retreat when I was 13. I did it for a week. At that time, I was like forced into it, so I didn't really know what I was doing. But basically, for the entire week, you couldn't speak to anybody, so you had to remain silent. And throughout the day, you would either do a sitting meditation or you would do a walking meditation, and you could only eat vegetarian food. And that kind of experience, I think, for an adult or for a child who is interested in it, is very much this ability to tap into the present moment and to be aware of the life within every present moment. Because there's nothing else to do at that point, you know, there's nothing to think about for the future. There's nothing to think about in the past. You fully let yourself be there. There's nothing to distract you, but everything is alive. You notice that everything is still alive, although there is really nothing around you. You may find that you are sitting in the same spot for 3 days. It seems as though not a single second has passed. Time just kind of seems to dissolve. And I have another really crazy story of my grandmother again, where she once told me that she meditated for several days without, you know, opening her eyes, without going to the bathroom, without eating, without food or anything. She just meditated straight on for 3 days. But as she was doing the meditation, she could feel herself floating. And at some point, she noticed herself floating and she lost her concentration and she opened her eyes and she saw that she was in the next room, that she was no longer in the room that she was in before. So it's just a really interesting story. There's a kind of silent ease when you're around the people who have the Siddhi of Presence that radiates out to all of creation. When you're in the Siddhi of Presence, You breathe deeply and you breathe as one in unity with everything in the universe. And there is a softness in your gaze that comes through your eyes and into the people that you are interacting with. So that's going to be my transmission of Gene Key 20, Human Design Gate 20, the zodiac sign of Gemini for you today. Did I mention this was Gemini? I think I did. But yes, can you imagine a Gemini that's truly silent and in the meditative state? How powerful that Gemini would be. So yes, do comment below if you have this gene key or you resonate with this in some ways. What has been your experience with it? And if you like this video, then do give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button if you haven't. If you've already subscribed and you've been coming along with this series, then thank you very much, beautiful souls. I appreciate you so much from the bottom of my heart. And if you guys are, of course, interested in getting a reading, then do head over to my website, tanastrology.com. Me and my team have a variety of different services available there. And coming up next is going to be Gene Key 34 and Human Design Gate 34, which is your programming partner. And I'll see you in that video. Sending you guys lots of presents today.